variety of settings. I initially worked at the Hetty Larlin Foundation. I'm not sure if any of you are aware of that, but I worked there for 3 years and then did Cleveland Clinic, so more medical-based kiddos, then did 12 years at the county, so in-home, early intervention, preschools, and now I've been 8 years in outpatient private practice. So I've seen kids in a variety of settings, which has been a really nice experience because when I was in the hospital, you think you know the whole thing, and I gave people like probably this much homework every time they came in, and then I went into the home and went, oh yeah, that's completely unreasonable. I also didn't have any children of my own at the time, so that also helped. Once I had my own child, working mom, I was like, oh yeah, we can't do all those. So I scaled it back to like, here's the 2 things you're gonna work on for the next 2 weeks, So really tried to kind of funnel in the most important things. I wanted to kind of get an idea, just age ranges for your kiddos. So if you could just, age ranges for your kids or kids you work with?
I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old.
Okay.
4, 3, and 2. 5th grade, 3rd grade was the 5th grader that I hear about.
Okay.
I'm a CODA. I work with 2nd, 3rd grade.
Awesome.
5th and 3rd.
Okay.
Preschool and kindergarten.
Okay. Okay.
Ages 4 and 5.
Okay.
I have a 5th grader and a 1st grader. I'm here for the 1st grader.
Okay.
He's 8 in 2nd grade.
Awesome. Great. So nice variety. Most of the activities can be scaled up and down for a variety of ages, but I do have some that are more geared towards others, so I'll try to just sort of mention that. And then at the end, if there's any questions specific to your child or kids that you work with or whatever, just feel free to ask. Okay? What I wanted to start the podcast or the presentation with was, what do I look at when somebody comes to me and says, hey, my child's got this funky handwriting thing? I wanted to give you a quick idea of what I look at so that when you go home, you can look at that with your child. Look at them a little bit different eyes. My oldest had handwriting problems and had sensory problems, so I was often looking at him as a mom, but when I stood back and looked at him as an OT, I saw different things. So it's really important to look at a couple different things. So the first thing I always tell parents to look at is think about the environment that you're trying to have them color in, draw in, study in, whatever their ages are. Think about where you're having them sit. Some kids like to just sort of sit and get all scrunched up in a beanbag chair, which is awesome for reading, but not really so great for writing because you're kind of in this little position and they're trying to write like that. Oftentimes, I know for me, the kids would sit at the kitchen table. Seems like a great place, but often the chair height, table height, all those kind of things are not best for their handwriting. Most of the schools have appropriate sized desks, the littler desks in the kindergarten stuff, but every now and then you go in somewhere and the school is like, this desk is way too big for this kiddo. So you want to think about that. You also want to think about your little guys having some time at a table. A lot of times they're just zipping around, so having some time at a little child-sized table or putting a little chair up to a coffee table. You also want to think about the noise in the room. Some kids need it very quiet, nothing else going on. Other kids need some white noise or some other things going on, music playing, so that they're not distracted. Sometimes if it's dead quiet and then the light goes on or the refrigerator goes on or whatever, that's almost more distracting than a little bit busier room. So you want to think about that. And then you also want to think about the lighting. Is there enough light in there? Where is the lighting? Some of the kids don't like the overhead lighting. Most of our homes don't have that, but like in the schools or even in my clinic, I try to change the lighting a little bit just because those buzzy fluorescent lightings can be real distracting. So you want to think about those. I gave you a sheet that talks about how do we know if the chair is the right height? How do we know if the table is the right height? My daughter is 11. She is in 5th grade, and she's tall. She's almost 5 foot. The kitchen chair is still not the right height for her. It's still too big. Because if you look on your sheet, you should be able to sit in the chair with your hips at 90 degrees and your feet on the floor and have 2 inches, or I always say like 2 fingers, between where the back of your leg is and the seat of the chair. Most chairs are very deep for young children, even for some adults that are shorter. And so they can't sit all the way back, or their feet are straight out because they can't bend the knees at the height. So you want to think about that. You can still use that chair, but then you need to put something behind their back and something under their feet, okay? And I use really fancy things like this, like a phone book covered with duct tape. So one of these under their feet, one of these behind the back, if that's where you absolutely have to have them studying so that they get that exact position. You also want to think about the table height, and on the back side of that sheet has the table height. That's usually the other biggest problem with using like a kitchen or dining room table. Table height for kids, a lot of times it's like chest high, so you'd be writing like this. So think about if you were trying to write like this. You really want it to come more just above the elbows so that when they put their elbow on the table, they're able to write at a nice level. Because as all of you, ideally, our kids are putting their forearm and elbow on the table to write. And so you want to be in that comfortable position. So those are just things to think about. So a child-sized table off in the corner is something that would be a better height for them, or make adjustments with your table. Sometimes I use 3 phone books, 1 under their butt, 1 behind them, 2 under their feet, maybe 4 phone books. So just things to think about. I also do a lot of things with vertical. And I'll get into that a little bit more when we talk about wrist strength. But easels, so the easels that you have that maybe have a chalkboard on one side, paper on the other. In my office, we have dry erase boards in every room just hung on the wall. You can hang a roll of paper on a wall. You can hang paper with little magnetic clips on your refrigerator. Just something to get vertical. Gets their eyes right in front of the paper. Gets the paper upright so you get a really nice wrist. So that's a great thing to look at as well. If they're having additional problems, we use something like this, like an incline board. You can buy something like this, or this is about the size of the 3-inch 3-ring binder. So you can use that too. I'm very much about using everyday things. You can get some great things in catalogs, and I brought catalogs. And at the end of the PowerPoint, there's websites for all those catalogs. But I would say probably 80% of the things that I get at Marks and Target and Dollar Store and all kinds of places like that. So you can get a lot of things reasonable. So you don't have to spend a ton of money on stuff. I do tell people to try different rooms. If they've always studied in the kitchen and it's hard for them to focus and get going, pick another room and just see. Try that room this week, you know. And then again, the lighting. You know, make sure there's enough light, but not too much light. The next thing I do when kids come in is I look at their body. Your core, just like every time you go to an exercise class and they talk about getting your core in shape, your core is the key to your writing. It's one of the main factors, and you need to have a good posture. Your posture in standing, your posture in sitting. You know, does your child slouch in their chair? If they're sitting on the floor and the teachers are asking them to crisscross, are they like this? We call it a posterior pelvic tilt, but are they rounded? And then look what happens to your head, and then you're going to try to write. It's just not a great position. So what does their posture look just when they sit in the chair? How can we help them with that? By fixing the chair, but also by strengthening the core. And I'm going to give a couple ideas about that in a minute. Head control. Is their head in a nice position? Ideally, when we're all lined up, our ears over our shoulder, over our hip, over our feet, over our ankle. Is that happening, or is the head out in front? Because again, now you got a funny position as far as your vision at the paper. You also want to look at the shoulders. A lot of our kids are very weak in the shoulders, especially kids that never crawled much, or our kids with low tone. So if you're weak here, and we want this beautiful fine motor stuff here, you're going to get this big swoopy thing, okay? And a lot of times that's also what I look at when I have a child either write on the, on the piece of paper on the table or up on the vertical board. I look at where does the movement come from? Is it coming from here? Is their elbow resting, or is it like this big motion? If you try yourself, okay, I'm going to write, but I'm going to write from the shoulder. It's messy, it's big, it's not on a line. So take a look at where the movement's coming from for your child. And then we can look at activities for that. And then the wrist. A lot of my kiddos write like this. Well, if you look at yourselves writing, we should have wrist extension. So if you're writing like this, it's not going to be as neat. Okay? Plus you're going to tend to, as you write more, get cramps in your fingers and down your forearm. Other things that you'll see with the head control, and my son was really good at this, they're doing this at the table, or sometimes their head's all the way down on the table and they're trying to write, which surely gives you lovely writing because you can't even see what you're making. So take a look at those postures. So what are we going to do about that? Things that we do, animal walks, okay? A bear walk is hands and knees, okay? Or I'm sorry, hands and feet. and your head's up. So a lot of times we'll do a bear walk, but I want the head up. So we'll have pictures, maybe knee height or lower on the walls. You can have that down your hallway. Walk down, find me the panda, and they're walking on hands. Oh, there it is, So you're doing a fun game, but you're strengthening the shoulders, you're strengthening the neck, you're strengthening the core, and you're putting input in the hand for the arches. So in that fun activity that doesn't feel like a writing activity, you've just done, some really nice stuff for your child. Crab crawl, that's where you're this way and you're on hands and feet, but this way. So you got to really activate your abs, and you're crawling down the hallway. We put up cones, we do obstacles. We have the kids carry something on their tummy around the cones, drop it in the thing, go back to the beginning. Lots of fun stuff you can do with that. Elephant is really just more of this kind of a walk where you have your head down and your hands locked like a big trunk, and you're swaying back and forth, and you're walking. You're getting some really nice left, right, crossing midline. A lot of our kids do not cross midline very well, as they're writing across the paper, so that's fun. You could even hang something and they can hit it with their trunk as they swing through. Okay, you can make it fun. Frog is you get down in a deep squat and you got your hands between your feet and you're doing frog jumps. Okay, you can do those all around the room. These are also great things for a 5-minute break when you're doing writing. Get up and do some animal walks. The seal is laying on your tummy, feet up, and clapping like a seal. So it's kind of what we call prone extension, but it's the whole body up. It's pretty hard to do. It's great to do that with your child so you can do it longer. Time yourselves, okay? So those are some really fun things to build the base and get a lot of input. Obstacle courses are the best. They're my favorite. The kids can build them. So you work on construction praxis, which is that idea of coming up with something and then actually physically building it. You can do heavy work. They'll haul over some couch cushions and some, phone books and all kinds of stuff. You want to climb over, you want to climb under. Again, getting all that input to the core as well as through the hands. Wheelbarrow walks. We used to do those as kids all the time. Wheelbarrow races, you hold their feet, they're on their hands up, everybody go. See how far you can go. Lots of shoulder, lots of core, head and neck control. Any kind of play in prone or on their tummy. So little guys, I have them do like their coloring books, and just color, and they're in prone prop on the floor. Even if they have TV time, they can watch TV in prone. That way you get dual. At least it's not just passive TV time. It's kind of a exercise. Scooter boards. They're just those square scooter boards I use in gym class. But the other thing that I like to use is hit the garage sales and find skateboards, because that's a little bit longer. And then they can lay on their tummy and propel themselves forward by their arms. Again, around obstacles. Therapy ball, the big exercise ball, doing tilting and bouncing and sitting on those. I also do a lot of pretend painting. This is a great one. You don't even have to add anything to it. They can just pretend to paint the wall like this. Lots of great shoulder, but if you're outside, dip it in water, it gets really heavy. And now they can paint your garage door, or they can draw sidewalk chalk and then erase it with this, okay? Or a big paintbrush, like a 2 or 3 inch paintbrush, same thing. Once you wet it and then start, slapping water on the garage door, it's pretty heavy. They get a lot of shoulder strength. I have no idea that they're doing writing exercises. So those are good core stuff. Your hands. Our ability to use our hands in a variety of ways to manipulate our environment is how we learn. That's how we learn from day one, and it's how we learn all the way through. So how can we move and manipulate our environment? Our grip actually starts with crawling. So it always makes me kind of cringe when doctors go, oh, it doesn't matter if they ever crawled. It's like, it does matter. But you're getting weight through your shoulders, so you're building strength. When you're crawling, so you can see where you're going, your head is up, you're building neck. And then you're starting to build your hand arches. Our hands are arched. They're nicely cupped. There's an arch going both side to side and forward back. And so without that arch, and you'll see in some of the kids that have problems with handwriting, their hands are very flat. They just don't have those arches. So we want to have activities to build those arches, but it starts with crawling. In hand manipulation, the ability to put a couple things, coins, reach in your pocket, and then get it all the way up to the fingertips, and then get it all the way back down. So a lot of play with coins with banks and stuff like that. I mean, when we were kids, pennies were a big deal. So we did a lot of that. Now everything's gone paper and, credit card, and so there's not a lot of coins, but going back to like pennies, I'm sure you've got a ton of them everywhere. So use the pennies and give them a bank and work on, having some in their hand, getting it up to their finger, tips and getting it in. Or a token system if that's what you're using for rewards. They could do the same thing. So how do we work on hand control? I use, again, my really fancy stuff. This is Mr. Mouth. He's a tennis ball. Okay? But if you squeeze the corners, he opens up. And you get a lot of nice hand strength that way. I usually hide marbles and beads and stuff in there so they can feed Mr. Mouth. So they can go ahead and just feed him like that. I use therapy putty. It's similar to Play-Doh, but much more dynamic, stretchy, and it has different strengths. It can be really, really firm, or it can be really, really soft. Hide the pennies or coins in this, dig them out, then feed Mr. Mouth. So you can get a lot of hand strengthening there. Again, the putty's a great study break, especially for some of the older kids. They're like, oh, I don't want, do 5 minutes of just stretching and pulling putty. Do something fun with putty. Clothespins, pinning anything on clothespins. I used to do a small clothesline with my kids' artwork, and so whenever they would bring something new home, they'd clip on a new piece of artwork on there. We talked about picking up pennies and so forth, hiding them in your hand and getting them to your fingertips. Clay tray, that's literally just like any kind of a plastic deli tray or whatever, and then you take a 1 pound thing of clay, smash it in there, and then you take a pencil and you draw in it. It has this great resistance, it's something different, so they can practice their letters in there, and then you get a lot of nice strengthening. Cupping the hands, we talked about the hand arches, playing games that have dice, and asking the kids to shake the dice with 2 cupped hands, one over the other, versus just like this. So that works on, again, their hand arches. A lot of times I'll have kids that don't have a good grip. I'll have them hold a toy or a snack in their ring and little finger. So those are into the palm of the hand, and then we work on the grip this way. It's really nice, especially some of my kids that, are motivated by their fruit snacks or their fishy crackers. Get to the end of the line, you can eat that one, put another one in there, get to the end of the line, you can eat that one. They're through a little bag of fishy crackers by the end of the paragraph or whatever. So that's a great way to do it. Different size pencils and crayons. There is a multitude. Little guys, some of these bulb crayons are nice. You start to, again, get the hand arch. So these are really a nice thing. I found these at Target just to kind of get more of a pinch on a crayon. They're like a little triangle crayon, and they've got a little spot for your fingers. I do use pencil grips. I don't use them a ton, but I do use them. So, and there's all kinds of different pencil grips to help the kids to hold on better. Sometimes the kids have a big fisted grip and they're ready to move on to a smaller grip. Sometimes a smaller utensil, whether it's a little golf pencil, or I save all my broken crayons, and the kids are always like, gee, Miss Chris, you really should buy some new crayons. And I'm like, no, it's okay. You've got this big grip. Well, if you don't have a big thing to grip onto, guess what? If it's small, you're going to start pinching it with your fingers and hang on to it to draw. So save your broken crayons. They're really helpful. Now, some of the kids that don't have as good awareness, these Laddie pencils that typically the kids look at in kindergarten might be really nice. Sometimes they're squishing too hard because they don't feel the pencil as well, and they actually need a little bit bigger pencil, or those little bit fatter crayons. So depends on their needs, either a really big or really small. Spray bottles are great. These are $1 at Mark's or whatever, but these are great because you can really get a couple fingers in here, and you can squirt the plants outside. Again, if you're drawing sidewalk chalk, you can squirt the chalk, clean that off. Another one that's nice is the little hole punches. They can punch all kinds of little confetti. There's the ones that look more like scissors, and then there's little ones like this where you can pinch it. Great strengthening, and again, they don't know that they're doing an exercise for. Another thing that I take a look at is their visual skills. A lot of my kiddos that have problems getting it on the line, whether or not they're spaced either too close or too far, it's a visual issue. And so there's visual motor skills, your eyes actually moving, and there's visual perceptual skills. How are you seeing that? Can you see one shape within another? Can you see where the line is? Or when there's all those lines on the paper, do they all kind of look the same? So do we need to look at highlighting lines or different colored lines, those kind of things. Some of that you'll see start to come out real early when they're trying to do puzzles. The little guys, when they're doing the single shape puzzles, they're putting the shapes in the shape shoulders. You'll kind of get an idea. Are they going right in, or are they kind of all over, and then they finally get it in? So you'll see some of those skills in your younger kids, and then those will affect their abilities as they get older. Tracking, can they follow something? Just like if you went to the eye doctor, and I usually use like really fun finger puppet guys, you know, and I always take a look at how is their tracking? And what do they do with their head and their eyes? At a very young age, they should be able to track all these things without moving their head. Are they moving their head to follow it all over? Well, that tells us they're not able to hold their head steady while they move their eyes, which is going to affect their writing. It may also affect their reading. So taking a look at that. Taking a look at the ability to look between two items. Okay, look from one to the other in different places. Obviously, once we hit school age, we do that a lot. You're looking at the board, you're writing on the paper, you're looking at the top of the paper, you're writing in the blanks below, those kind of things. So can they move their eyes from one to the other? And again, how much head movement? You know, they up and down and up and down. If you do that, you're going to lose your place. You're going to write it on the wrong line. Being able to converge your eyes. Can you bring your eyes to the middle and focus on that one point? Or when you do that, it's real interesting. You come, you know, with the kids with a finger puppet, and you'll see the eyes just kind of leave. It's like, what? Find my guy again, you know. So see if they can bring their eyes and stay on that. Important for reading, because you have to be able to fixate on those reading words. So the issues that come with that is letters floating above the line, your dangling letters not going below the line, your G, your Y, your Q, your P, letters that are too close or too far. You'll have kids that'll write, you know, one letter every almost finger width, and then you'll have other kids that they're all together on the same line. So what can you do at a really young age? Get a medium-sized ball, just rolling the ball back and forth, getting those eyes at midline. You know, they get a little bit older, you're doing a bounce catch. You know, not just tossing it up to them in the air, but can they bounce and catch it? Can they see it bounce? And then, you know, the timing and sequencing for that. As they get older, we do a racquetball, we do a ball physics program. It's really great for pulling in those visual perceptual skills. But it has to do with a series of, you know, I bounce to myself, I bounce to you, we pass behind our back. Just a lot of those kind of things. But it really helps the visual motor. Balloons are great. They float down slower. Beanbags are great. So for my kids that are not catching balls yet, we play beanbag toss, or we throw the balloon up and catch it. Because it comes so much slower down, they have the time to actually be successful. Because you want them to be successful, and then you always want to make it a little harder. Throwing at moving targets. Sometimes we, you know, have kids even tossing at each other, like the beanbags, or those puffs that you use in the shower. Those are great. Get a bunch of white ones. We call them snowballs this winter. We're throwing them at each other. Kids are on the swing, and you're trying to hit somebody. You know, it's a puff. It's not going to hurt, and it's fun. But now we're really trying to get those visual motor skills going. Flashlight tag. My kids love flashlights. We'll lay on the floor. You have a flashlight. They have a flashlight. They've got to catch you with their flashlight. Then you take turns. Then you got to catch them. You know, tracing letters, tracing different things with the flashlight, both across the room. And then also they have those little finger flashlights. You can do it real close up. So again, they're tracing letters, but it doesn't seem like handwriting work because you're playing with flashlights with it. Connect the dots, word mazes, all those busy books, you know, that you can get for really inexpensive. Those are great, you know, the things that are at the tables at the restaurants. You know, so a simple maze, a connect the dots, word searches, a picture find, same and different, two pictures. You know, what are the 7 things that are different in this picture? The slant board, like we talked about, if there's a vision issue, sometimes just getting it up a little bit more versus flat helps them to see better and to write better. And then we always sing to the kids, and we always talk about start your letters at the top. We have a lot of kids that, well, we almost like draw their letters. They come from the bottom and they make these different swirls. The likelihood of having reversals when you're coming from the bottom is probably about 50% more. So we try to have the kids start their letters from the top. There's a lot of good programs that have just, you know, printing books and stuff like that that help you with that. But there's like, you know, just always reminding them at the top, at the top. Regulation. and attention. How long does your child sit to color and draw and write? Is your child wiggling and fidgeting when they're trying to do that? Is he instantly frustrated, gets started, walks away, wants up, or is there this big, and this was in my house, tears and yelling and drama when we go to do homework time? So some things that you can do about that. Some of it will come naturally as, if there's a problem with core, if there's a problem with the hand strength, if there's a problem with visual motor, or visual perceptual, as you improve those areas, the writing gets better, so they're more confident, they're willing to sit longer, and it starts that positive spiral up instead of that spiral down that so many of us have experienced. But sometimes you also need to give them some extra support as far as regulation. So a lot of my kiddos, if they're real wiggly, I have them sit on a ball chair, or I have them sit on a disc seat. Just that a little bit ability to wiggle but stay in their seat, can really help. It also kind of wakes them up and activates their body a little bit. So if they are kind of low tone and their body's wanting to slouch, it kind of perks it up and makes them sit up a little straighter. I also look at chairs with armrests, which is kind of a challenge to find. I use cube chairs a lot in my office. It's literally just a cube, a box with a seat in it, but because it's a box, the armrests are right here. And it just gives them an idea of where their body is and where it needs to be versus slopping off the chair. Squeeze balls, we use squeeze balls and we use the putty. We also use, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Smencils, scented pencils. These are great, and some of my kids love these, especially some of my older boys, because it's hard to get some of my older boys interested in writing. They've already been writing for a while, and so some of them, they'll find a certain scent that they like, and these I find at like the Science Center, who had it? The one girls store. They had them. They have them for different seasons. A whole bunch of Christmas scents came out. It was like gingerbread cookie and sugar cookie, and but they have just about every kind. Root beer barrel's my favorite. I think I would write with that. And the scent lasts for a long time, so those are nice. Movement breaks. Before, after, during, okay? A lot of our kiddos, if they have a hard time writing, the last thing they want to do is sit there for an hour. So having little breaks. Break the task up into smaller sections. Let's get through this sheet, and then we'll take a 5-minute break. But try to make it an organizing break. Something like one of the activities we talked about, like the Mr. Mouth. Let's hide all the marbles, put it in Mr. Mouth. Okay, we're done with that. Let's go back to our writing. Let's throw at a target for 5 minutes. Let's go back to our writing. Organizing their workspace is always a great thing. A lot of my kids use that excuse for up and down, up and down, up and down. Oh, I got to get a pencil. Oh, I don't have an eraser. Oh, I need a ruler. Oh, I need another piece of paper. So if you have all that stuff on their little table, or you encourage them to collect all their supplies before they sit down, then that's one part of the problem you don't have to address. Calm and organizing music. I use a ton of music, both in my practice but also at home. It's amazing how it can really organize your child. Some of the kid songs, when at a really young age, is organizing. If you think about them, they have a very distinct rhythm to them, so that can be very organizing. Some of the kids, the classical stuff is very organizing, the Mozart, the Vivaldi, those type of things. Some of them, it's more like pop tunes. Some of the kids are like, I don't want that classical stuff. Find, some music that's organizing. Let them be a part of that. Offer some suggestions, but then also say, well, what would you like to listen to? And then let them try that and then go, well, was that easier for you or was that harder? I noticed you were up more or you were sitting more. My son's 18 now, and some of the music I picked for him when he was studying was not as organizing for him as it was for me, which he promptly told me as he got older. But he's picked his own music, and I see him listening to music with headphones as he's studying. Sometimes I listen, I'm like, that would not be helpful for me, but it is for him, so that's okay. So being open to that piece. We do a lot of kids yoga. It's great. 1 or 2 cute kids yoga poses in between, for study breaks. We do brain gym, which is a series of movements that works on midline, but again, it's movement that sort of organizes your body right, left. The old-fashioned movement games that we all did as kids. Red light, green light, Simon Says. Those are awesome for their body, and they're great for study breaks. And if you have more than one child at home, everybody can do it. And then you can go back to study time. Excuse me. Specific writing concerns. Okay, so kids that push too hard, they snap their crayons, they snap their pencils, it's really dark writing, their hand is like white knuckling it. Generally what that means is there's decreased awareness in their hand, okay? It's under registration, meaning they don't register the information either from a touch, tactile sense, or from a proprioceptive. Proprioceptive is your joints, your muscles and tendons that cross your joints, knowing where you are, where your hand is. I know my elbow's bent, I don't have to look at it. I know where it is. Some kids, especially if you have low tone, this goes with low tone, you don't have this great body awareness. So you're not really aware of where your hand is or what position it's in. So you grip harder to try to figure out where is that pencil. I always tell people, if you want to get a somewhat sense of that, put on a winter glove, could just be a knit glove, put your hand in your pocket and try to find a quarter versus the rest of the money in your pocket. It's very difficult, and you really have to push hard and feel that money to see what it is. That's how they're feeling everything, okay? So it's different. So what can we do to help them? Some of it would be, you know, the different kinds of grips, or for the little guys with the pencils, the bulb crayons to get them in a better position. Again, these might be the kiddos that you might use a thicker pencil so they don't have to squeeze so hard as a thinner pencil. There's some nice, as the kids get older and they're using pens, there's some nice pens that have textured grips. So there's more input right on the gripper, okay? Lots of tactile input. Shaving cream, rice bit, just immersing their hands in lots of information. When we do shaving cream, I get out a, you can do it in the bathtub, which is great, on the wall, so it's not messy. But you can also do it at the table. I get out a cookie sheet that has a lip. Okay, we spread it all on there. But then start adding texture to it, or add color to it. We add finger paints into it, and then we add baking soda, or we add salt, or we add, you know, just add different things. It changes the texture, it makes it fun. Gives a lot more input, and then you can do that 5-10 minutes before you do writing, or as a break. Proprioceptive input, that push-pull kind of input. Leaf etchings, you remember if you did as a kid, you put the piece of paper over the leaf and scribble on it with a crayon. That's a great way to do it. They have these, we used to color paper and then, or paint paper and then color over with a black crayon and then, you know, etch it off. But they have them pre-made. And they have all kinds of seasonal things. Oriental Trader is great for this. So for every season, every holiday, every religious, whatever you want, they can do this, and it's great. You get a little stick, so you can hold the stick like you would a pencil, and you can have them write their name on it, draw patterns on it, and then as you scratch it off, you can also use a clay tray. It has, it's a nice plastic tray. You put clay in it, and then you can use a pencil or the same scratch-off stick. You can draw shapes in it or the letters in it. We do the putty exercises, squeeze, pinch, pull on the putty. For kids where they're pressing too lightly, their grip is weak or it's immature, this could be hand strength issues. It could also be over or under registering of that tactile or proprioceptive input. We do hand strengthening exercises. We use the putty, we use tongs, we put little snacks or little things in an ice cube tray. We use the tongs to pick them up and, you know, take them out or feed ourselves. Clothespins, you can hang their artwork on a little clothesline and they can pinch the clothespins to add different artwork. You can use a small toy or a snack, put it under the ring finger and little finger, hold it in place, and then you get a 3-finger grip on your pencil or crayon. You can use a weighted pencil. There's nice heavy pencils. Either there's a pencil in and of itself or there's a weight that you can slide on a pencil. Gives more input. They know they have the pencil in their hand. There's all different types of pencil grips, triangle, grips that kind of look like a little umbrella. That gives them a little bit more of a nice shape to their hand. Kids that have problems forming the shapes in letters, letter reversals. Typically letter reversals can occur all the way up through age 7 years old. So if they're still doing a few up through 5 and 6, it's still okay, but if it's continuing to be a problem or it's very frequent and they're 7 going into 8, could be more of an issue. Could be visual perceptual, can be motor or sensory or a combination of any of the 3. Things that you can do, use a lot of different mediums to practice the letter shapes and just even general shaped circles and so forth. Use chalk, use crayon, use marker, colored pencils, clay, shaving cream, finger paint. We do the slates with the chalk. We do a fun trace erase with that. The slate itself has borders so that you can only make your letters so big, so it gives them sizing. You can draw it on the slate and then use a small wet sponge to then trace erase it off. A lot of times I'll use two slates. I'll do one, they'll do one, we'll switch. That way they can trace erase on the letter that's formed correctly. Draw letters or shapes on their back. Have them tell you the letter that you drew, or have them draw it on the board or on a slate. We also use the block paper. This is sort of a nice transition from the slate. It's little, gray boxes, so smaller than the slate and doesn't have the actual raised edges, but does have the same shape, and trying to get them to make their letters a certain size. You can see Bobby's letters on the block paper. The first one is a hand over hand, so we did it together, and then the next couple, he did a real nice job. Again, trying to get those letters smaller. Often when he would write, it was the whole size of the paper. So this is really much smaller, getting towards that line size that we want to see. Vertical deviations, when they're not writing on the line, they either have floating letters, or the letters that are supposed to dangle below the line are not dangling below. These typically are visual perceptual issues. So any of the activities that we talked about under visual perceptual skills, the mazes and the picture finds and the flashlight tag, those are all great. The start with writing inside a box, either a rectangular box for their whole name, or individual boxes like the block paper. Highlighting the lines on the top and the bottom. You can buy highlighted paper, or you can just use a yellow highlighter and highlight them. There's also the paper like I have on here where the top line is blue, the bottom line is red. That gives a little more information. There's raised line paper where you can actually feel the top and the bottom line. I use Bendaroos and Wiki sticks, sometimes to form the letters, but other times to just put it on the top and the bottom line so that their letters can only be so big, and then you can always peel it off the paper and no one's the wiser after. Here's Bobby again, writing on a line. It's below the line, but he's got the sizing. The letters are similar size, which is what we were trying to shape with the block paper. And he's got the idea of the line. He just doesn't quite have it on the line there. Horizontal deviations, where either there's too much spacing between each individual letter or word, or there's no spacing between the letters or words. The top one that you can see here, it is actually two sentences, but they're so clumped together you can't see it. The bottom one, after we did a bunch of visual perceptual activities and fine motor activities, was 4 months later, and that's how she was writing her letters. She had the spacing down, she understood where the word started and ended. Again, usually with horizontal deviations, it's visual perceptual, so going back to some of those visual perceptual activities, some bilateral activities, the brain gym, the animal walks, finger spacing. You can always work on, when you get to the end of the word, put your finger there for the next one. They have those real tiny stamps that we use, or a little popsicle stick you can use for spacing. Here's another, a little bit older child. He was not using the spacing as well, and again, it's not too bad, but the more they write, the less you can tell where the sentences are and where they start. Here's one of our guys with some nice printing success. He's worked on it for quite a while, and so we have some nice letters. They're on the line, they're a reasonable space, they're looking good. Here's cursive. Some of the schools aren't teaching it anymore, but we're really trying to encourage them to. It's just, for some of our kids with handwriting issues, cursive is such a nice option. Their cursive is better or easier to read than their printing. The word is connected, so it's easy to see where the word starts and stops. It's easier to keep it on the line because they're not picking up the pencil and putting it back down. And then also looking at your child's draw a person. It gives an idea of their body map. What do they think their body is? There's very early pictures of draw a person where it's a head with the arms coming out of the ears and the legs coming out of the bottom of the head, moving to a more detailed draw a person where there's definite arms coming off the body, legs coming off the bottom, there's fingers. Here's a picture of somebody started off with a draw a person, has ears, arms are actually coming off the legs, so they're getting the idea of the arms are not out of your ears. But a month later, after some perceptual things and some body awareness things, we actually have a body on our little draw person, and the arms are coming off the body. And then here's this beautiful little draw person. I had to include him. He was just so cute, but this was another one of our friends that used to draw like a stick with a head, and now is drawing this great draw person. So global strategies for success. Set up the environment. Look at where you're gonna start doing your writing or drawing activities. You know, the things that we talked about in the beginning, the chair, the table height, those type of things, lighting. Prepare the body. You know, if they're just coming home from school, they're not ready to just sit down and jump into doing their homework. Give them some time, give them a snack, something crunchy, give them something to drink, ideally out of a straw, something cold or tart that really wakes up their body a little bit, refreshes them. Do some physical activity, do the obstacle courses or climbing or something like that. Try to get their body as ready for sitting down. Tap into their interests. You know, if they like Thomas the Train, if they like Hello Kitty, if they like, you know, try to use those for your writing activities or drawing activities. Definitely set times for the end of the activity or the break so that, and use a timer, either a visual or auditory timer, so they know they're not going to be just sitting there forever. We're going to work on this for 10 minutes and we're going to take a little break, or we're going to work on this for 20 minutes and take a little break. Take turns, especially with younger children. I draw, you draw, I draw, you draw. Makes it so much more interesting. It's very hard for them to stay focused when you're just sitting there with them and saying, okay, we're going to write this and do this for an extended period of time. Always try to alternate your preferred and your non-preferred activities. So I pick something where you have to get this done, but then they can pick something. You can give them their choice of what to pick to do during that time, but that way, you know, it's not just hard work the whole time. There's some preferred and non-preferred. And have fun. Try to tap into your inner child as far as, you know, what is something that would be fun and motivating for you to sit there and do. We had been asked to talk a little bit about writing and keyboarding. Handwriting is definitely very important for daily life. So many things come to us in a written form and probably will continue. So it is important to have those writing skills. Grocery list, to-do list, personal letters, phone messages left for a coworker, signatures. Also, you know, especially with cursive, the ability to read handwriting. If you don't know how to write cursive, you're not going to be able to read somebody's cursive. So there are some really important reasons to keep the writing in there. But sometimes at some point you need to start thinking about, you know, moving to typing or keyboarding. Certainly with all of our kids, they're going to move into that with Facebook and email, and, you know, the high school starting to do things on turnitin.com. So you want to start looking maybe more heavily towards the keyboarding or typing if fatigue or eligibility is so high that it's becoming a problem for this child. They're having a hard time focusing on the rest of their tasks, or they're getting lower grades because nobody can read. What you want to do as you're looking at this is definitely track the amount of time it takes them to write a paragraph and the amount of time it takes them to type a paragraph. They will get better with their typing, but you also want to be sure, like if you're going to switch everything over to keyboarding, but it takes them even longer to type, you know, you're going to want to ease that in, because that could be just as frustrating. The research on children about typing, that they're really not motorically ready for formal typing until 4th grade. So they can certainly be introduced to the keyboard. We certainly do a lot of typing activities, but for actually, like, I'm going to start typing all my work, it's really 4th grade and after that you're getting closer to being ready for that. There's lots of free typing programs. There's freetypinggames.net. There's typing.com. There's just a lot of free typing activities out there so you can play around with. They're fun, and that way you don't have to invest a ton of money up front when you're starting to introduce the typing. As far as helpful resources, I listed the material websites that we tend to use for purchasing a lot of the equipment that we use for fine motor activities, habilitations, achievement products. We do Oriental Trader, Fun and Function, Discount School Supplies, so we get it from all over. I also get a ton of stuff from just Five Below, Target, Packetans, Marks, you know, Drug Mart. So look for these things anywhere. A lot of it, you do not have to buy therapy stuff. There's things that are just as good, that are just as useful, you know, in regular stores for, you know, $1 or $2. I do use the Handwriting Without Tears books quite often. They have a nice program for that. With the cursive, I do use the Loops and Groups by Benbow. I gave you the Handwriting Without Tears website. As far as visual perceptual games, there's an I Can Learn game online. There's a whole free section of that you can do that look at all the different parts of visual perception, visual discrimination, visual closure, just different pieces, and there's separate games for all of those. It's nice to intersperse those with some of the books, what's different on this page versus that page type books. It's fun to do it on the computer sometimes too, just to sort of change it up. All right, is there any questions?